New Zealand's worst murderer will spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of ever getting out. Brenton Tarrant has been handed the harshest possible sentence and a first in New Zealand. For his many victims, it was what they wanted and have waited 18 months for since that day last March when their lives were changed forever. Outside court, there were cheers, applause, joy and relief. Our reporter Logan Church has been at the High Court in Christchurch, and just a warning, his story may contain some distressing details.
On each of the 51 charges of murder, charges 1 to 51, you were sentenced to life imprisonment. I order that you serve the sentences without parole.
Justice Cameron Manda saying even that isn't long enough.
Your crimes, however, are so wicked that even if you are detained until you die, it will not exhaust the requirements of punishment and denunciation.
Victims and their families cheered with joy as they left the court. They got what they had all asked for, the harshest possible sentence.
The terrorists throw us with a bullet, and the loving people of New Zealand and Christchurch, they throw us with a flower.
Earlier, Crown Prosecutor Mark Zarifa argued the historic sentence would be justified.
The harm to the survivors, the victim families, the Muslim community of Christchurch, and to the rest of New Zealand who stand in solidarity with the victims is irreparable. And I submit, Your Honour, that the offender's actions are a painful and harrowing mark in New Zealand's history.
Tarrant chose to represent himself during the sentencing. He did not oppose the Crown's proposed sentence. Lawyer Kerry Cook acted as amicus curiae to provide a legal opposition to the Crown. He said there was potential for rehabilitation, and Tarrant had offered to meet with his victims. He says his extreme views had also recently tempered. He also submitted a sentence of life without parole was unconstitutional and potentially breached Tarrant's human rights. But Justice Manda told Tarrant the question had to be asked. If this sentence couldn't be applied now, when could it?
But did you not consider, however long the length of your incarceration during your lifetime, that it could, even in a modest way, atone for what you have done?
Justice Manda listed each person who died or was injured. Fathers, brothers, mothers, sisters, husbands, wives, sons and daughters. He described to Tarrant the immense heartbreak their loss had caused their families and community.
You deliberately killed a 3-year-old infant by shooting him in the head as he clung to the leg of his father. The terror you inflicted in the last few minutes of that small child's life is but one instance of the pitiless cruelty that you exhibited throughout.
Tarrant was told to stand as the sentence was handed down. It was met with silence from the court. Tarrant was impassive. Outside, crowds broke into song as victims of Tarrant's attacks emerged from the court. They shouted, cheered and hugged each other. For Tamala Tuju, who was shot 9 times at El Nor Mosque, the sentencing was a long time coming.
The killers had what he deserved, and he is going to jail without parole. And then he will give his last breaths in jail. But we will walk freely in the sunshine.
Gamal Foda, the Imam of El Nor Mosque, walked out of the court precinct with pride.
And we are very proud that we are Muslims in New Zealand and will continue to serve this country. And no punishment again is going to bring our loved ones back.
Hamina Tuyan, who lost her husband in the attacks, also welcomed the sentencing.
If you ask a lot of us, we would tell you that this is what we've been praying for. This is the next best that we can have in New Zealand justice system. And so therefore, we're all just relieved, we're contented, and we just thank Allah for this. Yeah.
While today's sentencing marks the end of this chapter of this awful story, it's not over. For many, their life is now defined by surgeries and therapy. For many here, life is still a daily struggle. The pain's still very raw. But perhaps today, a chance for at least a little closure. For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we will put Logan's story online on our Facebook page so you can see the video, and we'll have more on the sentencing after 6.